Midhens on a mission. When Walter and the two chicks arrived at the cabin, it looked as if nearly every chicken in the homestead was there. Most were crowded about the cabin, milling around, while others were clustered around the door, trying to look in through the cracks. Some were even trying to climb or jump up to get a peek in through the shutters. A flock of indignant gallowards who resided in the cabin were off to the side, were complaining about not being allowed to go into their nests and roost. Chicks, hens, and roosters were everywhere. Walter stood there dumbfounded with his beak hanging wide open. Chick and Peck stood next to him, looking around. Suddenly a group of smaller rowdy chicks scurried past. One of them stopped to look at Chick, and then she peeped for her sister, who came scurrying back. Peeping, she pointed at Chick, which caused more chicks to come huddling around him. Together, peeping furiously, they finally stopped and just stood there looking at Chick intently. Chick, anxious because they were staring at them, peeped. "What?" One of the smaller chicks asked, "Are you our bubby or our sissy?" Chick did a double take and peeped again. "What?" "Are you our bubby or our sissy?" the little chick asked again. "I think she's asking if you're her brother or her sister," said Peck. Chick shook his head and exclaimed, "Neither." "Are two," insisted the little chick. "No, I'm not," insisted Chick. "Are two," insisted the little chick again, and louder. Then the other chicks began jumping up and down and flapping their little wings, chorusing together, "R2, R2, R2." Chick looked at Peck and asked, "What's up with them?" "Oh, they're politics chicks," said Peck, "and it seems they remember you from when you were hiding in their nest." Still jumping up and down, the chicks began peeping. "Bubby sissy, bubby sissy, bubby sissy." "That figures," said Chick. "Only politics chicks could be this annoying." And when they stopped, one of them asked, "Are you a boy or a girl?" "I'm a boy," said Chick. The little chick suddenly peeped loudly, "Bubby!" and hugged Chick around his lower middle. The other chicks also began hugging and peeping. "Bubby, Bubby, Bubby." "I'm not your Bubby," said Chick as he struggled to get them off of him. "See that rooster standing over there? He's my dad, and we're looking for my mom." The little chicks looked with uncertainty at Walter, who was engaged in a conversation with Viola Spudfoot. "Daddy?" peeped one of the chicks questioningly. "No, he's not Daddy." She then turned and pointed with her wing and said, "But there's Mommy." The little chicks began peeping. "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy." "Looks like you're an honorary politic chick," said Peck teasingly. "Ha ha, very funny," said Chick, who thought it was anything but. He then saw Biddy Polichick complaining to another hen about not being allowed in the cabin. The hen listening to her had that forlorn look that all hens have when trapped in a one-sided conversation with Biddy Polichick. Biddy was explaining in painful detail how she heard there was a corn shortage and she needed to get in and speak to the council of aunties and demanded that her corn allotment not be cut. The chicks ran over and clustered around Biddy's feet, peeping excitingly about how they found their bubby. Biddy Polichick gave no notice, and she was too busy making a rather boisterous case that not only should she be given her full corn allotment, but that it also should be increased because she had so many mouths to feed. About that time, Walter turned to Chick and Peck. "We have to go," he said urgently. Concerned, Chick peeked, "What about Mom?" Walter quickly replied, "Viola is going to take us to her now. Come on, we have to go." As Chick followed his father, he wondered what was going on. Then it occurred to him, instead of going before the council of aunties, maybe they were going to make a run for it. But where? Where could they go? Then it dawned on him. They were running away to go live in the deep brush. That must have been what Viola meant when she was responded so mysteriously to Peck's request for help. She was going to help them escape. As Chick scurried to keep up with Walter and Viola, he thought how exciting this was. He thought that he might finally see the mysterious swimming chickens of Grymme Creek. Who knows? Maybe they could teach him how to swim. Oh, that would be exciting. Chick wondered where they would live. Maybe they would start their own homestead with the field mice. It would be free from dumb rules and wicked hens like aunties. Then suddenly his happy thoughts were rudely interrupted by a sad one that hit him like a bag of wet feathers. If he left the homestead, what would happen to Peck? In a short amount of time, the two had become best friends, and Chick didn't want to leave him behind. Chick thought maybe Peck could come with him, but he decided that life in the deep brush would be too harsh for someone so small and fragile. He just hoped that their new homestead would be close enough to where they could come back and visit Peck from time to time. He decided he would ask Walter to see. "Dad, where are we going?" "I told you," said Walter as they hurried along. "We're going to get your mother." "Oh, I know that," said Chick, "but where are we going?" Walter, confused, looked at Chick and clucked. "Why, back to the cabin, of course." "Well, aren't we running away to start a new homestead in the deep brush?" asked Chick. Walter stopped and looked at Chick and said, "What on earth gave you that idea?" Before Chick could respond, Peck immediately peeped up. "If you're running away to start a new homestead, I'm coming too." Chick looked at Peck and said, "You can't come. Why not?" Chick didn't want to hurt Peck's feelings by saying he was too small and weak to come. Instead, he peeped, "'Cause your mom will be looking for you." "So," peeped Peck, "I can't think of a better reason for me to run away." Walter just shook his head and balked. "Nobody is running away. We're just going to go get your mother." "We're not going to start a new homestead?" asked Chick. "Of course not," said Walter. "Why on earth would you even think that?" "'Cause we're running away from the cabin and going to get Mom," said Chick. "We're running away from the cabin to avoid the mob," said Walter. "Well, isn't Mom back at the cabin?" asked Chick. Walter replied, "She was afraid we wouldn't be able to find her in that crowd, so she told Viola where we could meet her." Disappointed, Chick hung his head and stuck out his lower beak. "So we still have to go before the council of aunties?" Walter put his wing around Chick and said, "I'm afraid so, son." Walter hated to disappoint Chick, but he hated the thought of taking him and June into the deep brush even more. "I don't care where we go so long as it's not back home," said Peck. Suddenly Walter became concerned. "Does your mother know where you are?" he asked. "Well, I think so," said Peck evasively. "Think so or no so?" said Walter. Peck, trying to do his best to sound truthful without actually telling the truth, said, "Mr. Pinfeather, do you think for 1 minute that my mother is the kind of mother not to know where I am all the time?" "I do if you're the kind of chick that doesn't let his mother know where he is going." He looked at Viola and said, "Peck's mother tends to be a bit fussy about where he goes and who he associates with." "That a fact?" clucked Viola sarcastically. "Oh, yes," said Walter seriously. "She's very particular." Viola rolled her eyes and clucked. "We nae got time for dis. I says we take him with us, and if we comes across his ma, we can let her decide what to do with him." Walter looked at Peck's pleading expression and said, "I suppose you're right. We should keep an eye on him, at least until we find his mother." "Yes," peeped Peck, as he gave a jubilant little hop. "Thanks, Mr. Pinfeather. I really appreciate it." He then whispered to Chick, "Hopefully they won't find my mother. I know I'm not looking for her." "Oh, all right," balked Viola impatiently. "Enough dilly-dally. Let's get a move on." "Indeed," said Walter, "we mustn't keep your mother waiting." As they hurried along, Chick trotted up alongside Viola and said, "Thanks." Viola clucked. "What fer?" "For convincing Dad to let Peck come with us," said Chick. "'Tain't nothin'," said Viola. No, really, I appreciate it, said Chick. His mom hardly ever lets him have any fun. Ho there, buckaroo, clucked Viola. Going afore the aunties to serious business. Tain't meant to be fun. I don't know, said Chick. Compared to what Peck's mom usually treats him, going to see the aunties is a regular picnic. Viola cocked her head and said, Fair point, youngin'. So, what's your plan? Said Chick. We fetches your ma and heads back to the cabin. No, I mean, when we get before the aunties, what's your plan for advocating for us? The shocked Viola balked. I tain't advocating for y'all. Dismayed by Viona's strong denial, Chick turned to Peck and peeped. I thought you said Viola was going to be our advocate. The surprised Peck yeeped back. Well, I thought she was. I told you how she reacted when I asked her to help. And I is a helpin', clucked Viola. Getting red around the beak, Peck replied, I must have misunderstood. Don't y'all fret none, sighed Viola. We done got you someone who's a lot gooder. Someone who's way smarter than all of us put together. Even smarter than Aunt Acidia? Asked Chick. Oh, Aunt Acidia wouldn't want a minute, said Viola, but I'd say so. Who is it? Y'all see soon enough, said clucked Viola. Till then, y'all just hold your water. Even though Viola wasn't forthcoming, she gave Chick hope. As they moved along, Chick noticed they were heading towards the coop, and when they got there, Viola led them to the backyard and then to the edge of the tall grass. She then trilled a whistle that sounded sort of like a cricket. Chick was amazed. He didn't know chickens could whistle. Viola, can you teach me to do that? Viola frowned at Chick and put a wing-tip to her beak, signaling him to be quiet. A few minutes later, the grass parted and a large head poked out. It was Fudgy. Did anybody follow you? She asked. Nary a soul, said Viola. When Fudgy stood up, she was as nearly as tall as the grass. When Chick saw her, he wondered if he ever got lost in the tall grass again, could anybody be more useful to have around than Fudgy? Then he noticed what could only be the top of Wedgie's head peeking out over the tall grass. Get down before somebody sees you, he heard somebody say to her. Oh, don't get your tail feathers in a twist, balked Wedgie. To whoever was talking, it's them. Then suddenly Vance popped his head out of the grass. Are you sure you weren't followed? He asked. Viola rolled her eyes and clucked. Sure I'm sure, you old woolly mudhead. Vance came out of the grass, followed by June. Seeing his mother, Chick peeped loudly and ran over to her. June wrapped her wings around him and hugged him close. Chick looked up at his mother and said, I thought we were running away, but Dad says we aren't. No, Chick, we aren't running away, said June as she lovingly nuzzled Chick. We're just being careful. Vance, still not convinced that it was safe, said, I better go check to make sure you weren't followed. He tried to appear nonchalant as he walked up to the coop, but all the suspicious looking around and checking behind trees and bushes ruined the effect. When he finally came back, Viola clucked at him. Satisfied? I done told you we ain't been follered. You can't be too careful, said Vance. That mob around the cabin is out of control. I was barely able to sneak out myself. Why are all those chickens around the cabin? Asked Chick. Is it because of us? Well, I'm not sure, said Vance. I didn't stop to ask. They must have heard about Aunt Acidia's old corn shortage, said Viola. No corn shortage has been confirmed yet, said Vance. Giving Vance an annoyed look, Viola balked. And why she cut corn workers' pay? And what I heard she ain't done yet. She'll be cutting other folks' corn too. Angry and annoyed, Vance balked. It's all rumors, I tell you. Sure, there's been some cutbacks, but I assure you it's only temporary. The agenda the aunties have for today is all about the Pinfeathers. Wedgie asked, so why does the Council of Aunties have me and Fudgy down here chick sitting these coopies? I mean, it's not like they're anyone important. The Pinfeathers are barely a brood besides and in and of themselves. This one has been accused of first-degree illegal corn harvesting." Hearing that, Viola flared out her neck feathers and barked menacingly. "Mind your beak, missy. We may be coopies, but we won't be demeaned by the likes of you." Not one to back down, Wedgie flared out her neck feathers and leaned down to strike Viola right between the eyes. Viola, not being one to back down herself, stood her ground and also aimed upwards to strike Wedgie right between her eyes. She figured since Wedgie was such a large target, she had the advantage. Then suddenly Vance got between the two hens with surprising strength and authority, shoved them apart and barked, "Now that's enough, you two. Viola, back off. Wedgie, you stand down." Viola backed up, but Wedgie continued to stand there with her head stretched out and her neck feathers flared. Vance got right in her face and balked even louder with even greater authority. "Wedgie, as a duly appointed representative of the Council of Aunties, I'm ordering you to stand down." Wedgie had respect for authority, especially if it was loud, so she backed down. Then Vance clucked, "Wedgie, even you should know better than this. The rules clearly state that the Pinfeather brood is innocent until proven guilty before the Council of Aunties." "That's right, ya nigh old big mudhead," barked Viola. "Y'all needs to know them rules. I know 'em 'cause I gots me rights." Vance turned quickly to Viola and barked, "Yes, Viola, we all know you got rights, but there is one right you don't have." Stunned at being talked to by such a short, unimposing rooster, Viola clucked, "And what's that?" "You don't have the right to provoke the Midhen." Before Wedgie could offer a retort, Vance turned to her and snapped, "And don't even think about it. I am well versed in the rules of the Midhen conduct." Then looking at the Pinfeathers, he said, "As well as the rights of the accused." And then turning to Viola, he said, "I am also well versed in the rights of every chicken in the homestead, from the galliarchs to the coops, from the superior mother hen to the corn workers. Anyone who wants to try me, just go ahead. Our job is simple. We're to get the Pinfeathers to the cabin without incident." Vance emphasized the word incident like a hammer hitting a nail. "Now, does anyone have any more problems, smart remarks, or questions?" Everyone was too stunned at Vance's unusual display of ferocity and authority to respond, except Chick, who respectfully approached him and asked, "Are you a rule fair?" "I am the official galliarch court scratcher," said Vance with such finality there was not going to be any more questions asked. Vance then turned to Fudgy and Wedgie and said, "Now we need a plan to get the Pinfeathers and company past the mob and into the cabin. Any questions?" "No," said Wedgie, "you just leave it to me. When I used to play in the Scrumble League, I was a pretty fierce clobberer." "That was before you got kicked out for unsportsmanlike conduct," said Fudgy. League Scrambler is a bit more organized than the amateur version, which is similar to mealtime with the politics. There are two teams that play against each other, and the scrum is not edible. It is usually an old cob or something that can be carried in the beak. Points are scored when the scrum is knocked into the opposing team's goal. Whoever is running with the scrum is called the scrambler. The game is played on a time limit, and the team with the most points at the end of the game wins. The clobberer is more or less a defensive position. It is a chicken that blocks anyone from the opposing team who is trying to get the scrambler. It is not necessarily an assigned position. Any chicken that knocks someone down from the opposing team is considered a clobberer, regardless of whether or not they're trying to protect the scrambler. "Yeah, well, I prefer amateur scrambler anyway," said Wedgie. "Except they won't let you play either 'cause you're too rough," said Fudgy. Wedgie shook her head and clucked, "Bunch of whiners. If you can't take a hick, then why play scramble at all?" Knowing they didn't have the time to debate Wedgie's approach to scrambler, Fudgy tactfully asked, "Should we go and get the others?" Wedgie thought for a minute and said, "I think I saw Purdy and Jolene and Rylene milling around the edge of the mob. Do you think we need 'em?" Fudgy thoughtfully tapped her beak with the tip of her wing. What do we have? About 300 or 400 chickens crowding around the cabin? "At least, if not more," said Wedgie with a gleam in her eye. "We could probably handle it ourselves," said Fudgy. "Yes, but it would be a shame if the others missed out on the fun," said Wedgie. "Oh, I don't know," said Fudgy hesitantly. "More former amateur scramble clobberers could be a bit of an overkill." "Oh, come on," said Wedgie. "We may not get another chance like this again." Giving in, Fudgy said, "All right, go ahead, get 'em." "Great," said Wedgie enthusiastically. "I'll be right back." With that, she took off in a hurried chicken trot for the cabin. "That's the most excited I seen Wedgie in a long time," said Vance. "Yeah, well, Sis is always ready to do her duty," replied Fudgy. Vance shook his head and thought to himself it wasn't duty that Wedgie was so enthusiastic about as much as it was that she really liked to clobber. Fudgy looked at Vance and said, "By the way, we are acting under the orders of the Gallio Art Court, right?" "Of course," said Vance. He then turned and looked around at the others. "Wedgie has gone to get some help so we can get all y'all in the cabin. When she gets back, we'll go." Vance then went and sat down on a patch of grass in the shade and stuck his head under his wing. The others picked a spot on the ground to get comfortable and wait. Chick and Peck sat together. That was pretty impressive, the way Vance got between Viona and Wedgie, said Peck. "Oh, it sure was," said Chick. "And he seems to know the rules," said Peck. "Maybe even better than Aunt Acidia. Do you think he's our rule fair?" "I don't know," said Peck. "But it'd be kind of weird if he was." "Well, Vance is kind of a weird guy," said Chick. Peck agreed. "He is, but that's not what I mean. Historically, all rule fairs have been hands. I've never heard of a single rule fair ever being a rooster." "Is that a rule?" asked Chick. "Not sure," said Peck. "I know that way back when the rule fairs fell out of favor with the Council of Aunties, it wasn't long afterwards that the records of their service stopped. Maybe they didn't all disappear. Maybe they just went underground." Confused, Chick peeped. "What, you mean like moles?" Peck grimaced and said, "Not that kind of underground, Chick. I mean the rule fairs went into hiding. Scratcher could be a code word for rule fair, but he's still a rooster. Though maybe he is a rule fair because no hen wants to be one." "Oh, I bet you're right," said Chick firmly. "Maybe you should ask him." "Me?" peeped Chick. "Why should I ask him? He's probably your rule fair." "Ah, but we don't know that for sure, do we?" said Chick. "Which is why you should ask him so we can be sure." Peck insisted. "But if he is, he's your rule fair. You should ask him." "All right, if you won't, I will," said Chick, but he really didn't. All of this was unfamiliar territory to him, and it was almost as intimidating as being out of the coop after dark. The two Chicks walked over and stood in front of Vance. After a minute or two, Peck said, "Are you going to ask him?" "Don't rush me," peeped Chick. After a couple more moments of hesitating, Chick cleared his throat and quietly asked, "Mr. Vance?" Vance did not reply. Chick stood there, and after a minute of nothing, Peck whispered, "Ask him again." Peck peeped a little louder. "Mr. Vance?" Vance's slightly muffled voice tersely replied from under his wing, "What?" "Can I ask you a question?" Vance moved his head slightly as he opened one eye and said, "No." Then he put his head back under his wing. Surprised and annoyed, Chick asked, "Why not?" "Because I'm busy." "Doing what?" Vance again moved his head, but just enough to see them with one eye, and said, "Preparing for your case, now go away." He then tucked his head back under his wing. Chick and Peck stood there looking at Vance. Finally Chick said, "Does that mean he's our wool fair?" "Oh, I guess," said Peck. "At least, I suppose he's your advocate." "You'd think an advocate would be a bit more sociable," said Chick. "Not if he's a secret rule fair," said Peck. "I suppose," said Chick, feeling confused and anxious. He and Peck went back to where the others were. Chick sat down next to Walter and gave a frustrated "Rumph." Walter looked at Chick and asked, "Something on your mind, son?" Chick looked at his father and asked, "Dad, are things always so crazy when you get called before the council of aunties?" Walter rubbed his beak and said, "Oh, I suppose." Viola then clucked up, "Them aunties is just a bunch of old bickering biddies, what loves to cluck and peck on one another, and when they ain't clucking and pecking on someone else." "You should try and show some respect," said Fudgy. "Those bickering old biddies are our leaders, and they're working for the good of the homestead." Viola snorted and muttered, "'Tis more like they working for the good of themselves." Fudgy, who was not as volatile as Wedgie, chose to ignore Viola's remark. She had respect for the aunties and felt it wasn't her place to question them. She was a midhen, and it was her job to help hens protect their chicks. At least that was her job until this morning. Still, it wasn't her place to question the wisdom of those in charge. The group sat quietly, waiting for Wedgie to come back. Then suddenly in the distance there was a rumbling noise. Viola looked up into the sky and asked, "Is that thunder? It can't be, 'cause there's nary a cloud in the sky." "I don't think that's thunder," said June as she pointed up the path. From around the coop, trotting in perfect formation, were a dozen midhens led by Wedgie. Vance peeked out from under his wing, and when he saw the midhens coming, he got up and stood at attention. Wedgie led her group to Vance and stopped. She and the midhens stood at attention. Fudgy immediately went and stood next to her sister. "All present and accounted for, plus a few extra," she reported. "And when I went to get Purdy, Jolene, and Rylene, I found a few others who volunteered to help." "Very good, Wedgie," said Vance. "Have they been fully briefed on our mission?" "Well, more or less," said Wedgie. "They know that you're the chicken in charge." "I see," said Vance. He then stuck out what chest he had as far as he could while everyone else looked on. "Ladies, our objective is simple," he said. "We've got to get the Pinfeathers and companies into the cabin to meet with the council of aunties. What I need for you all to understand is that they have been summoned and are coming voluntarily. They are not prisoners. I repeat, they are not prisoners. Is that understood?" The midhens rumbled they understood. Vance continued, "Now, unfortunately, due to rumors, gossip, and innuendo, a crowd has amassed around the cabin, thus hindering anyone from going in or out. Once the Pinfeathers and company are inside the cabin, you will be assigned to crowd control. Is that understood?" The midhens again rumbled they understood. Now, I know some of you are first-rate clobbers in the game of scramble. In fact, I recall coaching many of you myself back in my own scramble days. "Vance used to coach scramble?" peeped Chick. "I heard about it, but I ain't ever believed it," said Viola. "Oh, believe it," said Fudgy. "He was pretty tough, too." "Why'd he quit?" asked Peck. "Well, I heard he quit when he became a scratcher for the superior mother hen," said Fudgy. "I guess she keeps him pretty busy." Vance continued, "I know that I do not need to tell you this is not a game of scramble. You are to use no more force than is necessary. That means there is to be no beak bashing, comb pulling, feather plucking, or any of the other standard or even non-standard clobberer moves. Is that understood? The Midhens somewhat less enthusiastically rumbled they understood. Good, said Vance. Now I'm going to leave Fudgy in charge. She will give you your individual assignments. As for me, I am needed back at the cabin to prepare things for the council meeting. Now, are there any questions? Wedgie raised her wing. Yes, Wedgie. How do you intend to get into the cabin without our help? Oh, don't worry about me, said Vance. I'll manage. Vance then looked at the Midhens. Are there any more questions? When no one said anything, Vance turned to Fudgy and said, All right, Fudgy, you're in charge. Remember, we are counting on you to do this with a minimum number of casualties. Don't worry about it, sir, said Fudgy. We'll be careful not to get hurt. I wasn't asking about you, said Vance. I was asking about the mob. Very good, sir, said Fudgy. Vance nodded, and then he turned and scurried back up the path as fast as his short legs could carry him. As Chick watched him go, he said to Peg, This is starting to get interesting.